All right, folks, we are returning to the story of David. This one is an echo of a previous story. So we're still in the repeating trope of David's on the run and Saul is in pursuit, back and forth and back and forth. And so just an initial, what was your all's feeling about this story, which is there's a debate of whether this is the same story in a different version of the one a few chapters ago, or if it truly happened twice. But how are you feeling about this whole cat and mouse situation? What are some initial impressions?
Well, I wondered why they did it for a second time,
Mhm.
other than it ends a little differently than the first one did. The thing that continues to bother me about reading about these things, here are two armies in camp. Here's the king lying there. The army is surrounding him. And David walks in, takes his spear and water jug and walks out, and nobody even says hi. It sounds so implausible the way they chose to present it. But maybe that says, look, this is a story. This is just this is not accurate history. We're not writing the exact history. We're just showing
Mhm.
you the background out of which your faith developed.
Mhm.
Well, they did. At least I got the impression that it was clear that the Lord had made sure that everybody was sound asleep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there is a little bit of that going on here.
Okay. Okay.
I'm trying to look up something real quick because I know this story sounds unbelievable, but I have something that might make it a little bit more believable. So
Okay.
keep talking about your impressions. I'm trying to find a story real quick.
Okay. Mm.
I thought another interesting thing, and we had talked about it previously, was that it says that David's reluctance to kill Saul was related to the fact that he had been anointed by the Lord,
Or
and
yeah,
no one has the right to take the life of
yeah, yeah,
someone.
yeah.
And that hadn't been that clearly specified before, I don't think, in others earlier stories.
Mhm. So keep that in mind. That's one of the sentences that has a specific Hebrew word that actually might bring out it caused a chain of thoughts for me that may show why David is reluctant to hurt Saul.
Okay.
So how does the attitude of this one change? Like there's from the other story where David's hiding in the cave, that one has more monologues in it. But is there a tonal difference between these two stories before we dive into it? Like some initial, like what feels different about this version of the story?
Well, certainly seems to have a lot more positive feelings about David. I mean, he's been out chasing him around trying to kill him,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden, clearly he has a a complete turnaround as far as his attitude towards him. He calls him my son,
Mm-hmm.
all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the one thing that I kind of noticed though is the last time Saul said, "Oh, I see you're going to be a great king of Israel."
Mhm.
Like there is still the tenderness of my son, but some of the grandiose language is not there,
Mm.
which we can flip back and forth when we get to it of like that conversation, but I we can dive into it. All right, I found the story in the name that I was looking for. So, this is one of those stories that like flies around the internet of like, did you know? And it comes from World War II. And it is a gentleman named Joe Medicine Crow. And he is from the Crow tribe of in a Native American tribe in the United States. Um, One of the things that he is famous for is that he is one of the last people to have earned the requirements of what it counts to be a war chief in his tribe because they have like a certain amount of things they have to do to earn that rank in their culture. And one of the things you have to do is steal the enemy's horses without killing anyone. So you have to go into their camp, steal their horses, but not wake anyone up.
Okay.
And evidently, he snuck into the German troops and freed and stole over 50 horses and got out without hurting anyone, without killing anyone. But it's a story of like how stealthy. It's a test of stealth and all of that. So uh when Larry, you're like, I don't know about like David just like walking in, and it's like he may have not walked in, but it's possible that because I know of this story, even in World War II, Joe Medicine Crow was able to steal a bunch of SS horses.
Okay.
So
I hope God put the Germans to sleep.
Yes.
right. Anyways, he is actually a very fascinating person. He actually only passed away in 2016. So actually like not ancient history though, but interesting person who proves that yes, you can sneak into the enemy camps.
Okay. All right. All
So, but with that, let's jump into the story. Hello, B.
Hey,
right. Hi, Dee.
We're just getting some initial impressions out about our story for today. But we're just about to dive in, so let's go ahead and jump in. So I tried to look up who the Ziphites are. I don't know. So
Okay.
before anyone asks, I don't know who the Ziphites are.
Okay.
But evidently, David is hiding in their territory. Someone sees David, recognizes him, and so thus begins our cycle once again, is they send messengers to the king to say, hey, David's hiding out here, come and get him.
Okay.
So that once again starts off our story for today. And of course, Saul goes out and David's hiding. So even when we are seeing this setup of like Saul hears word, David goes into hiding, what are some of the things we're coming to expect now in the story? Like what's gonna happen here? Did you go like, oh, I recognize this now?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this has a little bit of counterintelligence. I feel like David's a little bit more proactive.
Right.
Because all of a sudden David hears that Saul is out there, and so one person is spying on one person. David sends out spies to spy on Saul, and Saul has help around him. And David sees him specifically when they have like set up camp. He is going with both his people and another group of people. My notes are saying Abner, son of Ner, is Saul's uncle. So this is a relation of his. And what becomes important is this is someone who is supposed to be protective of Saul. This is someone who is out there kind of like his bodyguard. It is an older relation. It isn't necessarily like this guy's going out to battle. It does seem like he is a general, but his duty is to take care of the king. And that becomes important in the story. So Saul is evidently laying in the center of the encampment with the army around him. And so David and his guy, who is a Hittite, Elimelech, that's an interesting name. I didn't catch that the first time. Ahimelech.
Yeah.
Melech means king, so this is a royal sounding name of the Hittites. I'm sorry, that it's a common name, but it also is like son of the king. I don't actually know what his name means though. Okay. Anyways, so this guy, so David's like right-hand man at the moment, and him say, okay, here's Saul's camp. Let's go down, check out what's going on. And everyone's in a dead sleep. So this is where the two stories that are very similar are also very different. So even just at this point where David's like, hey, let's go check out the camp. What are the similarities and differences that we are seeing from the other version of the story?
Got that one.
Let's talk. Let's have a
Yeah,
remembering session. What
review.
happened last time Saul
Yeah,
told
review what happened last time.
I have to find it myself. Okay. So this is a few weeks ago. So the comparison story is chapter 24. So same way, Saul goes out to pursue David. David is in the hills. The difference is Saul, if you remember, walks into the cave and is relieving himself. And that's when David's buddies go, hey, now's your chance to jab the king.
Oh, okay.
And David says, I'm not going to kill the king. And he takes the corner of his cloak. And then when Saul leaves the cave, that's when David like scrambles out and says, hello, I was hiding. I didn't kill you. Why are you trying to kill me? So as opposed to Saul going into the cave and David not attacking, this is now David going to scout where Saul is camped. So where are we like, what are the big differences here? I know they're apparent, but who is where is the drama in this story compared to the other one?
Well, there's a huge army lying out there, or a huge, at least for those times.
Right. So, there's a lot of people both times. I believe there was like, how many men come out?
400 someplace.
Yeah. So both times, Saul is bringing a lot of people out.
All had 3,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one thing that seems strange to me was, I don't know if this is that part, but they were talking to each other from a great distance. And I read up on that in the book that said that they're still doing that in that part of the world, that they can shout. I thought, how does their voices stand it? But they had a conversation out there at a distance. And I thought, that's strange. But
So
it struck me as odd.
One of the things you notice I grew up in Kansas. Things are flat in Kansas. There's not a lot that stops sound. The difference between Kansas and Michigan is Michigan has more trees. The thing is, Michigan is also very flat. It just is disguised because we have the height of the trees. So I bring that out to say, like, there's a lot of noise barrier because we have a lot of trees. If you're talking about, like, often there's cliffsides or hillsides that are elevated, there is no sound barrier, which makes sound travel so much easier. So it, like, you do have to talk loud, but not as loud as you would expect. Yeah, Larry?
If any of you saw Lawrence of Arabia, there's a big scene in there where Lawrence rides into a wadi. So he's on the valley floor and all the women are up on the cliffs and they're all shouting, Lawrence, Lawrence, Lawrence. And you can hear them down there where he is. So sound travels up there, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, David was up on a mountain too.
Yeah, right.
I don't know where Saul was.
What matters is that there's nothing blocking the sound. It carries a lot farther. And I just think that because of the trees that we are used to around, it dampens the sound a lot. So sound will carry. But yeah, they're talking between two far off points. Because frankly, Saul's tried to kill him and is still trying to kill him. I would yell. I don't want to get close.
And my thought was here, just a minute, there's all these people around and he can get through there and none of them wake up. And then somewhere the Lord put them into a deep sleep.
Yeah.
So that little item got taken care of for me.
So we were talking about that right before you signed on, B. I brought up a story from World War II where Joe Medicine Crow is a soldier from World War II, and it just proves that it can be done because one of the things he did to earn the title of war chief in his tribe is he stole 50 horses from the enemy. Like snuck into their camp, released their horses, didn't kill anyone, literally just stole the horses. So it means that David does know in how to infiltrate, kind of like how to like where the guards are going to be. He evidently has some kind of stealthy practice that he knows how to sneak in. So in the one story, it is said that Saul is delivered into David's hands because literally David catches him with his pants down in the cave, and literally Saul is unaware just in front of him.
Yeah.
The same thing is said here, where his buddy is like, hey, King Saul is delivered into your hands. But Saul is in the middle of a camp surrounded by an army. Why? Like, to me, these are two very different situations. So I'm gonna push you a little bit further. Like, why is this different? David hiding in a cave and Saul kind of just popping in, versus David going on an exploration mission around an encamped army. Like, why are these different?
David's the aggressor.
Say more about that.
Well, he has to agree to leave his safety and go out and be stealthy against this army. So I don't know whether that's being more trusting in God or trusting in some kind of protection he feels he might have. I'm not sure why he or that he has to prove himself to his people, that he's being kind of egged on a little bit, like, hey, here's Saul, what are you going to do about it? But he's more aggressive. He's more assertive.
Yeah. Other thoughts of what makes these two situations very different?
I think he was much closer at this particular time with the Lord and feeling that here we go again. I'm gonna go in and do my thing, but I'm not gonna kill Saul. And the Lord was kind of going ahead of and had everybody sleep and everything is hunky dory. I think I felt that one story versus the first versus this one, he is in his partner is the Lord as he goes in this event versus the 1 in 24.
Yeah. So with the 1 in 24, I believe, Gary, you were the one who pointed it out last time that like David goes in, but then has like this overwhelm of emotion where it's like, oh, David was close to killing him and then decided not to. Where I hear you pointing out, like, David's not even tempted to kill him in this situation.
No, I have a feeling that he's already tighter with God and going along step by step.
Okay.
So he's more assertive in following God's plan. He's not really so bent on harming Saul. Does he feel part of something larger?
I wonder if both of them wanted to get along. Did they, especially David in this case, really wants to make amends with Saul and get on his good side again? And maybe that motivated him
Mhm.
to say to Saul, look, what have I done? I haven't done anything to you. Why are you bothering? Why are you after me all the time?
Oh, good point.
Mhm. Right. So the other thing that I wonder about is how the optics are different this time around. Because in a way, if David had killed Saul in the cave, you could argue it was self-defense. That it's one of those of like, oh, I was here with my men, I was hiding, I was protecting my people. Like, I didn't, like, if he had killed the king, he would have had that kind of buffer of like, self-defense. But in this situation, that argument falls apart where, Jennifer, as you pointed out, going into someone's camp stealthily and killing a king is much more aggressive. You can't argue like, oh, I was just defending myself. Like, yeah, in a way you are, because he is trying to kill you, but you also, this is David in a way going on the offensive. This is no longer purely defensive. David is going and being more of an active, proactive person in this story. And I think that matters on how the decisions are being made, that he's not just hiding. Now he is spying on people. He's going out looking for them. Now he is actively infiltrating a camp.
Mm-hmm.
But he also says here, and that's verse 10, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he'll go down into battle and perish. So now his thinking is, look, I'm not going to kill him. That something else is going to take care of that for me.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about a few words, because thank you, B. That is a very key point here that I think explains a little bit of David's point of view that I didn't see as much in the last time, but it seems to be present here. So if you go the verse beforehand, verse 9, David says to Abishai, there we go, do not destroy him. So this word in the Hebrew has a host of meanings. It's more than just don't kill him, or else they would have translated it don't kill him. It also means don't maim, don't mark, don't hurt him, don't cut him, don't like disfigure him. It's like keep the king intact. Don't hurt him in any way. So it's more than just a don't kill him. Don't touch him. Don't do anything to his body. So why? Oh, okay. And then David has the thing, as the Lord lives, like he's the Lord's anointed one. And we see that David has a very high opinion of what it means to be the Lord's anointed one. That it's not just last time it was like, we're not going to kill him. This time it's like, we're not going to harm him in any way. God gets to do what God's going to do to him, but we are not going to. So what reasons can you imagine why David would have such a high opinion of the anointed one that it's like not even like theoretically they could have like gone in and like chopped off his earlobe and run out and it would have accomplished a similar task. Like he's saying like don't hurt him in any way. Why is that important to David? Or why can you think that would be important?
Well, doesn't David feel that he's been sort of anointed? I mean, it's been predicted that he's going to become king.
Right. So David is also the anointed. So they do have something in common.
Yes.
So why does that matter that David is also the Lord's anointed?
Well, someone may cut off my ear. I don't want that. Maybe it's self-protection.
Okay, say more. So why would it be self-protection? Oh, yeah, Gary, what's your thought?
Well, that's a little different angle, but as I was reading, I just felt that David was maturing and getting more comfortable with his position. And that's why he made it clear that we're not going to touch Saul.
So more of a like, hey, I don't have to prove it.
Mhm.
Like I'm fine just letting the cards play out. I can wait. I'm not in a hurry. God's gonna take care of it.
And maybe we can play this out so that Saul and I can have a better relationship.
Possibly.
Mhm.
All right. Other thoughts on this dynamic here?
Pretty good.
Yeah. And David is, he's not doing badly. He's been out winning battles and getting a lot of spoils. He's not under any great distress to try to ascend the throne immediately.
But he does still take the spear in the water jar. So he is still asserting his primacy in this because he was merciful. He's letting everyone know that he could have, but he didn't.
Yeah. Well,
right.
And he obviously doesn't want Saul to succeed in killing him.
Yeah.
He's
So
trying to avoid that.
say
Yeah.
more. Why steal the spear and the water jug? Because there's a very definite reason why.
Well, it's to let Saul know that he could have killed him again a second time. This has been twice that he spared Saul's life, and Saul better spare him.
So is there the water jug? I don't know if there's any other meaning behind, but the spear for me has a little bit of a secondary meaning other than just the like I took the thing right next to your head. What else has this spear been used for?
Well, he
Well,
can't
so-
kill David if he doesn't have a spear.
It disarms them, and also that's the symbol or the spear that he's thrown at him a number of times.
Yeah, right.
Like Saul got mad. He'll just throw his spear at him, and so he's like, I got your spear. You can't throw it at me now." Like it's kind of a secondary diss of like, dude, why? Why have you been throwing this thing at me? So I just love the humor and the irony in taking that specific object. Like he could have stolen the king's like robe or something, but no, he took the spear.
Mhm.
Well, it's a little easier to grab the spear than to take up to disrobe him.
Oh, I'm talking about the clothes that he probably has with him. Like
Oh, okay.
it's
All right.
that's used in other stories sometimes, where if someone wants to prove their identity, they take someone's like signet ring and their cloak. So that's often used in other stories as like a see, this was you, this is your cloak kind of a thing. So at any rate, so yeah, so he takes the spear, he takes the water jug. So what do we think about the fact that the story specifies that the Lord put everyone into a deep sleep? Is that just God helping David out? Do the readers not believe that David is sneaky enough just to get in and out of there without help? Like what do we make of this? Or is that just making it seem divinely ordained? Does it make a difference if God helps in this situation or if David's just good enough to get in and out himself?
Well,
It makes it more plausible.
So you all like it's more believable that he could get this. He needs a little help from his friends.
Right.
Okay. All right. So when David actually announces himself, he actually doesn't talk to Saul first. He talks to Abner, son of Ner, which is Saul's uncle. And one of the first things he does is he questions his manhood. So what is David doing there? Why say, like, are you not a man? What is David specifically insulting about Abner?
Not doing his job.
Well, he wants to know why he didn't protect the king. He's sort of berating him for not being an adequate guardian of the king.
Not doing his
Yeah, in a way saying, or it makes me think of, this is, I think, brilliant marketing in a way. I have known, or there are stories out online about internet security professionals that hack into companies and send them a message through their own system that says, hey, you have a vulnerability, just by the way. And that feels like what this is to me, is David's like, yo, I should not have been able to do this. You're
Yeah.
bad at your job.
Yeah.
So what do you, because I don't know about you, do you feel like David is legitimately mad at this guy here?
Oh. Well, I think he's taunting him.
I do too.
Yeah, so it's taunting? Okay. Because for me, if he really is like, no, we don't kill the king, he, like, it also feels kind of like, dude, like, you're gonna get the king killed like this. Anyways, any other thoughts on this, on him taunting him?
Well, I think it also is a message to Saul about his vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. Say more about that. Like, how is it a message to Saul here?
Well, that we not only came in and took the water jug and your spear, but you have your chief lieutenants all around here that were nowhere to be seen. They were not protecting you at all.
Mm-hmm. They're not protecting you, but I am. Is almost the underlying message that David protected Saul here, and Saul's people didn't. At any rate, so Saul hears his voice and hears all of David's taunts. And once again, he comes out with this tender message of like, is that you, my son? Which is, I believe, the same thing he said last time. Is that you, my son? So what does David say in response? Like, what jumps out at you in his response to Saul?
Well, specifically, he says, it is my voice, my Lord, O King.
So, right. So he calls him my Lord and my King.
Right.
Okay.
Saul just called him son. He says Lord and King. Do you all remember what he said last time?
No.
Flip, let's see. Chapter 24. Where does it say?
24.
Ah, here we go. So look at verse 11 in chapter 24.
Yeah. He's talking to Saul.
My father.
He calls him his father.
See the corner of his cloak.
So how do we feel about the fact that last time around, David's like, oh, my father, why are you pursuing me? And this time he's like, my Lord and my King, why do you pursue me?
Well, after the first episode, it didn't make any difference. Saul went right back to pursuing him and trying to kill him. This time, at least, Saul has said, hey, I'm never going to do this anymore.
Well, right. I mean, at the end of the last episode where Saul tried to kill him, he said he was never going to do it again. And look, he's doing it again.
Yeah, right.
So what do we think's happening with David in his mind? If all of a sudden it's like, dude, you said you wouldn't do it again, and now to
Well,
me, this is not as tender on David's side.
okay. David says the reason we can't kill Saul is God anointed him. Well, God's also anointed David. So if it's tit for tat, Saul shouldn't try to kill David then for the same reason.
Right.
Yeah, Saul's not looking at it that way. And of course, Saul had mental issues prior too. So
Yeah,
I don't know how far you could ever really trust Saul.
yeah.
So part of my question here is, what happens when you have a person in your life who makes mistakes, apologizes for it, and then does it again?
You don't
What starts
trust
to
him.
happen to the relationship? Yeah, Helen?
You don't trust him.
Mhm.
You don't, I mean, how could he trust that he's never going to do it again? He did it again.
But maybe David's feeling is that I don't have to worry about it anymore. Because my belief is if anything happens to someone that's anointed, God is going to take care of the retribution against that person. So I can't kill Saul, ergo Saul can't kill me, otherwise God will take care of him. Which doesn't help me if I'm dead, but
So that is like worst case scenario, but what do you see in the relationship between these two?
It's
So-
suddenly become a lot kinder. They're going to try to get along, and they are showing their closeness that they once had and might have again.
So, okay. So you all think they are actually trying to repair the relationship here?
well,
I think
Saul.
David is anyway.
Okay.
If he's not trying to repair the relationship, I haven't read ahead here. That is, he's at least trying to avoid the death of Saul on his shoulders. That he doesn't want to carry that burden.
Mhm.
See, I would personally argue, and granted, this is my own Chris Hallam reading of it. I feel like Saul is flipping into very tender language, and I don't see David actually responding with that same tenderness here. Where David doesn't want to be killed, and Gary, as you kind of said, it sounds like he doesn't want to have the death of the king on his conscience, if only because it's like, hey, this is God's anointed. I don't want God's wrath. But I do not see David moving towards Saul in tenderness. The language he uses is cold. He keeps referring to Saul in rank and title, but not father, not my like he's not using the familial language that he did last time. He's not evoking relationship. He's like, stop trying to kill me. But this may be just me. It looks like the relationship has actually been severed here. But that's my read of it. I don't know if you all see the same thing. Because it's not, or like if you look in verse 22, when once again it's like, I have, in 21, Saul says, I have done wrong, come back, my son David, I will never harm you again. And it like, come back, like I won't harm you. And there's like this beseechment to come closer, and David's response is, here is the spear, O king. Let one of your young men come and get it. He is maintaining distance. Where David's not coming close. There's an entreatment to come close, and David is saying, no, send someone to come get this. How does that feel to have that kind of relationship where one person wants to repair it, the other person doesn't, because the other person isn't consistent.
Well, I guess you can feel that David was at least successful. He got Saul off his back, at least it appears that he has, anyway, after Saul making 2 attempts on his life. He's got Saul to cease and desist. As far as he's concerned, that's the end of it.
He does say in 24, as your life was, this is David, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, not Saul, but in the Lord. And may he deliver me out of all tribulation. I guess you'd say it's not real close, but at least he's saying your life was precious. That my life is precious. So there's,
And you
know, a
haven't
little bit
valued
of
it.
let's get along.
Yeah.
And then, but at the end though, it says, so David went his way and Saul returned to his place. Like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, once again, you see Saul flip into tender language here. He is saying, blessed be you, my son, David. There almost sounds like Saul is still grasping for it.
But they're empty promises.
Yes, he has done that before. And so, I mean, how many times does David have to go through this before he just, here's your spear, that's it, have a good day.
But he also says to David, you will do many things and will succeed in them. So he's flattering David in a sense.
So this is one where we can see the hallmarks of an abusive relationship here. That I think it's not always highlighted that why people often stay in abusive situations is because when it's good, it's good. When you have someone who is tender and kind and loving and heaping on praise, it is good. People wouldn't stay if the good parts weren't good. And so when Saul is in his loving mindset, when he's tender towards David, it is easy to see, oh, he wants to repair the relationship. He wants to be a good father to him again. He is king. He knows how much David's life is worth. And you have all that tenderness and kindness. And David has gone back. And then it flips again. And then David calls it out and he says, forgive me, my son. And he goes back and then it flips. And this is one where we are seeing that David's not going back this time. And so this is one of the complicated moments of when do you forgive but not forget?
Well, the reality here is Saul can't be trusted. So no matter how many times these confrontations are going to happen, you got to always keep your eyes open and think twice before you do
Sleep with
something.
one eye open.
So, you can forgive someone for something because that's just sort of a cerebral, emotional sort of thing. But you can't forget because you can't change the past. I mean, the past is indelible, so you can't erase it like you can maybe forgive someone their transgression.
So this pattern is one that I hear a lot specifically with children to parents when parents have abusive habits. Sometimes people don't want to say, oh, my parents were abusive as if it was a personality trait, but you can be abusive in their actions. And what doesn't help is the narrative that the rest of the family has, because sometimes the family's like, oh, you have to forgive them. They're your father. Like, they're trying to make amends. You have to go back. Like, come on, family over everything. And guilt a child into a situation where the child's like, I've done this time and again. Like, I've seen this before. I am not making amends. I can forgive them from a distance. I understand they had a rough childhood, and like you can understand the situation, and you can say like, I don't wish them harm, but I am not walking into the house again. And I think that is sometimes very hard for people to fully ingest, is when children who experience abuse do not want reconciliation, especially when the rest of the family hear the abusive parents saying they want reconciliation.
Yeah,
And this,
but the point you made that, things are not always abusive. There were good times as well. Well, then you're in a way of balancing, were there enough good times to produce a feeling of forgiveness? If there weren't, if there were none, or at least very little, I think you can easily see why someone would find it very difficult to forgive somebody.
So one of my examples, I've talked about her before, is my dear friend Melissa. Her mother was bipolar, and she also passed away when Melissa was in high school. So like very complicated set of feelings there. And it's always interesting hearing Melissa talk about her, because she loves the Renaissance Fair because her mother took her there, and those were the good days. And she has very loving and tender emotions for the good parts. And some of the most horrific abuses she faced were also by the same woman. And so it's one of those that I would say rarely is anyone a complete monster of a person. Most people with these types of relationships still do have good memories, which actually makes it harder to walk away, because you can almost imagine a world where there was only good days. But that's just not the reality for some people.
Are you Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde?
Exactly. Oh, I mean, that's a great comparison. Like, how do we know which Saul are we gonna get, Jekyll or Hyde here? At any rate. So that's, yeah, Gary?
Well, just flashing back to, I think the fact that David decided early on in this chapter that whatever was going to happen to Saul to end his life was not going to be his doing. It was going to be God was going to take care of it. And so he kind of had put that position down. He put that line on the ground that it's not going to be me. So we'll get through whatever we can, but I'm not going to take his life.
And that to me, or Gary, you mentioned that you feel like David is like maturing in this passage. And that is where I see a lot of maturity of like, I don't have to enact my vengeance. And that to me is actually a very mature point of view of life is going to punish him. I don't have to.
And to me, Saul is showing himself to be a very bad person.
Indeed.
And sometimes it takes a lot of experiences for maybe David is arriving at a more negative view of Saul.
This is why, for those of you who were with us at the beginning of this book, I painted Saul in a good light. And it's because I do think I see him as a tragic person. because he was dealing with something that we probably have tools to deal with today that they just didn't.
Mhm.
And Saul wasn't all bad, and that actually is what complicates this whole thing. He was a good king for a while. And now he's a very bad king
Mhm.
in some ways. I mean, he's a bad person to David, and seeing the complexity there, I don't want to strip Saul's humanity away to make him a one. I think if we only took the latter half of this book, he is a Disney villain. He is just a one-sided Disney villain, bad person. But the whole story, I don't think anyone ever is that. And so I like Saul is just so complicated and messy, and I see why David is also all over the place in this story as well. Like David also is a messy person. Which is what do we do with stories of messy people dealing with messy emotions and messy feelings and messy actions?
Well, one thing though, we have to remember that Saul was ill too. He had a mental issue that wasn't his fault. You got to look partly at that. I don't know whether that affected his feelings toward David, but nevertheless, he had a cross to bear too.
Yeah.
I tend to cut Saul some slack because I feel the Lord is using him, God is using him to temper and form David. Because many times here, back when we're talking about Saul, God was doing things to him and making life tough for Saul. So anyway, I'm not ready to write off Saul as not being a very viable and important person, and a lot of goodness, but a lot of it, I think he had a purpose in the eyes of God to help form, in this case, David.
So one of the things that I put out there sometimes, and I use this sometimes when I do something wrong, I say explanation, not excuse. And because I want to explain where I was coming from, I am not trying to excuse my actions. I acknowledge they're wrong, but I also just need you to see where I was coming from. I also see that with Saul here is his mental illness can be an explanation, but it is not an excuse. So it's one of those that he still has to own his bad actions. And Gary, yeah, God may be using him in this story. He still has to answer for it, though. That, like, it's one of those that this is one of the complicated things. Personally, I hope I am not a side character for someone else's self-improvement. I like narrative-wise, 100%. That's what this text is doing. Life application, I want to be the main character. I will be honest. I don't want to be someone else's side character. I don't want to live a hellish life for someone else's moral improvement. I will be honest. But there's also a sense where, yes, David is learning through this. He's learning some hard lessons, and we see this. And at the same time, I am always uncomfy with the idea that, like, oh, God is sending us hard things to teach us things, because that makes God like a very manipulative God. And so it's one of those where some people are like, oh, there's a silver lining to everything. And I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like that the abusive people are seen as being teachers of lessons. that to me has some weird moral implications. So it's one of those of like, we can, once again, explanation, we can put it in the realm of explanation of we can explain that, hey, Saul did cause a lot of growth with David. Do we want to give an abusive person the role as his teacher? I don't know about that. I know I assigned you some Psalms as well. With that lingering thought, I do want to just quickly jump over to Psalm 35. Like I said, some of these were chosen semi at random just to get a flavor of the Psalms of David. And I was just curious if you all had any thoughts about this one. This is a prayer of deliverance from enemies, once again attributed to David and some of his poetry that he is writing. Any thoughts on this one?
Well, I kind of like the part in verse 10. O Lord, who is like thee, thou who deliverest the weak from him who is too strong for him, the weak and needy from him who despoils him. So he's recognizing that there are strong things and weak things, and you deal with it.
And God's on the side of the weak.
Right. But I think also there are bad things that happen, but I don't believe God makes them, just as with Saul. I mean, he didn't ask for that illness, but did God send that? No, illnesses happen. And for this,
I thought God did send that illness, didn't he?
well, maybe I don't know. God doesn't do bad things. But
there is what the text says, and there is our interpretation of it. Because technically the text says that God sent an angel to torment him.
Right.
But we could understand that as an explanation of mental illness.
yes, I think so.
But
I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff in this world. Does God make that bad stuff happen? Or do people make it happen?
That is the age-old question. And if we want to sit on that, we can always we can go into depth with the book of Job, because that is the entirety of what the book of Job is talking about is what? Why do bad things happen?
We keep saying God is good. And if God is good, does he do bad things?
Does a good God create a world with cancer?
Which is chicken and which is egg? Which came first?
Illness happens.
Yeah. Yeah, after we get done with this, Job would be a fun book to read. It's a very philosophical book, but it deals with exactly that question and a bunch of different answers to it.
No.
Well, I'm pretty firm on my belief.
Fair enough. So, we really quickly, we've talked before that there's like the typical elements of a psalm, which is there is a complaint, there is praise, assurance that God is going to act, and there's a fourth element that I forgot. Praise element. Anyways, which of those features do we see most prominent in this one?
Seems to me complaints.
How long, oh Lord, will you look on? Come on, do something, straighten this out.
So what kind of role do we see God playing in this? Like, how does this person envision God?
Therapist. He's listening.
God, sit there and listen to my problems.
I mean, people who are therapists don't solve your problems, they listen.
Okay. So almost by praying this prayer, you're kind of coming to your own solutions, but you need to pray the prayer to come to the solution.
That's a good explanation, Chris. Yes.
Okay. Any other roles that we see God playing here?
Well, it's a plea for the Lord to get involved and take care of me.
Yeah.
Oh Lord, do not be silent. Oh Lord, do not be far from me. Wake up. Bestir yourself for my defense, for my cause.
So we see bestir yourself for my defense. That's evoking a little bit of that like warrior God. I
Yeah,
want a warrior on my side. Wake up.
yeah, yeah.
Solve my problem for me.
Yeah.
The other one I would say is there's also a sense where God is meant to be like a judge, the arbiter of justice. Like, okay, there's two camps. There's the strong and there's the weak. Decide between us. Like, you need to be the judge of society here. And if you judge, you'll see that you should help me. You should really help me.
I think I'm kind of uncomfortable with the part that wants to see something bad happen to the people who are perceived as enemies. Let ruin come upon them unawares. I mean, I guess I just don't see this as a way out of difficulties, appealing to the war. Then you're limited to warfare.
Yeah, this isn't a civil case where someone gets assigned a fine to pay. This is wishing harm on someone's enemies. And that is the precise reason why I'm with you, Jennifer. I always feel weird about this of like, these people are wrong, punish them. It's a very vindictive prayer in a way. Does this prayer read differently if we're thinking about David pre-kingship or post-kingship? Like, if David the king writes this, is this different than like David in the hills is writing this?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think so.
So why is it different from one to the other?
Well, it's a pretty mean thought when you want somebody destroyed. That's pretty mean. And maybe he's learned that you don't do that later on. You look at another point of view, a more mature one.
Kind of selfish. A lot of things just asking that the Lord should be on my side for all these reasons and all these things, and not leaving anything for debate. There's no doubt. You got to be on my side.
Yeah, as opposed to the last one we read, the last one said like, oh, forget the sins of my youth. So there's like an acknowledgement of like, I may have not done everything right. This one, no acknowledgement of forgive me. This is only, I am in the right. God help me, you know I'm in the right.
Well, when you look at the stages of people, I mean, you look at a toddler, I mean, they would smash down anybody that was bothering them, pop them in the face, whatever they can think of. They don't do that when they get older. And maybe our feelings are toward that sometimes. You want to smash somebody, but you don't do it. You get angry. People get angry.
So by that logic, this feels like a more immature David. This is more like angsty teenager David.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's just fun to consider just some of his poetry. At any rate, so any final thoughts for today? All right, just a heads up for next week, I need to remind myself of this. So this is a reminder to me as well as you. There are I have you reading 2 chapters next week, and that's to keep together a story, like a continual story. And so if it gets to be too much, we will adjust it, because there's a really the second part of 28 is really interesting, but I'm trying to kind of keep things together here to talk one big story.
Okay.
All right. But with that, shall we close ourselves with prayer?
Thank you.
All right, let us pray. Gracious and loving God, I give you thanks that at least you promise that you have always room to forgive us. We acknowledge that, yeah, we are imperfect, and sometimes we want to explain why we do the imperfect things that we do, and you offer us grace and love. We know it's sometimes hard to do that with us for other people, because God, sometimes yes, we can forgive, but no, we can't forget, and sometimes we feel that that's to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves safe, to make sure that we are not walking into harm's way again. We ask that you be with us in those situations, that we may navigate those situations with grace and with love, that we may truly be able to understand another person's situation, that we may be unable to have empathy for those who maybe don't want to reconcile the same way that we do, that we may understand the pain that other people feel, that we may always work towards a better understanding of each other and a more loving way of being. So be with us in this next week as we once again try our best to be the best people we can be. Guide us in our decisions and be always at our side. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. See
Thank
you
you.
all next week.
Thank you.
So.
Great discussion. Thank you.